A very good evening and a warm welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, the NTV Uganda studios. Tonight on the show, we meet Caroline Kamia, who was born in Uganda, raised in Uganda, Kenya, and the UK. She is a film director and producer. She has won over 10 awards on the international scene for her work. And before we meet her, let's take a look at some of her work. This is an extract from her 2010 film, Imani.
Kale.
Wasajjanasa.
Zotena.
Bulungi.
Abeeka bali bati.
Gye bali balungi. Madamu yaza okusedda.
Simanyi. Nawe mmanyi. Afuluma n'ayingira n'afuluma. Olusimbula n'akaseera akatula ku wansi.
Kati kangende kanyumve.
You're back, Mary?
Yes, sir.
Good. I've left my clothes in the bedroom for washing. I need them ready for tomorrow. And make sure you iron them properly, okay?
Yes, sir.
Welcome, Caroline. It's good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
What does that feel like, watching yourself your work on screen?
Well, it's been 10 years since Imani, so it's kind of like a cultural celebration. And I just reminisce how tough it was to get that film made, the talents that have come off that film, where they are now, what I'm doing now. So it's just reminiscing, really. That's how it feels.
When you say tough, what do you mean? Take me back 10 years ago.
Wow.
It was your first film. You're trying to get it, together. Your sister wrote it. I saw a documentary on that. What was it like then?
Well, it was a combination of so many efforts, Even with the writing, we also had Judith Adon contributing to that. So what I can say is all of us were newbies. The whole crew, most like 99% had never made a feature film before. We were Googling roles in production meetings. Also with the writing, it was kind of like, I think all of us have grown up. At that time, nobody had taken the risk as a woman to make a feature here. And so I took my team, IVAD Productions, it was called at the time, now CK Films. And I said, we're going to do this. Saved some money from my corporate work. I'd worked on a lot of telecoms, breweries, all the big boys and girls, all their projects. I'd done a lot of those jobs and saved a little bit of money every year. And finally I said, I want to make the film I wanted to see growing up in England. Because when I lived in the UK, most people didn't believe we lived in houses. They thought we all lived in mud huts.
And trees.
Yeah, exactly. They thought we traveled over there like from tree to tree, that kind of thing. So that was why I did it. And when it came to getting equipment, I wanted to use the best camera. It wasn't available in Uganda. It was the red camera at the time, and there was only one in South Africa. So when I had the opportunity to travel to Vancouver in Canada and do some more training, I talked to the team over there, and luckily there was a guy there who was doing camera. He heard about it and he said, I'll come and help you out. And so he was one of the main, that was Andrew Copin. He came down with his team, and he was the camera team who really supported us. The rest, it was all local, and we had to hustle from transforming ourselves from documentary filmmakers into fiction filmmakers. Yeah, so it was a big challenge.
Do you remember how much it cost to put it all together, to make the film?
Well, at the time, I saved $80,000 US.
$80,000.
Yes, yes.
And now,
Yeah.
how much would it cost to do something like that?
You're probably looking at 300, I think, a minimum of
$300,000.
$300,000. You know, but I didn't have enough money even to edit the film. I was very green, you know, I'd done a lot of good projects here, but a feature film was new to me. So I hustled that money, and by the time we came to editing, I was editing with the team, run out of money, and in the end it was me by myself trying to cut it in the studio while we're doing other jobs. And I was just, an angel came from Sweden, saw this lady struggling away and said, hey, I think I can find a way to help you polish the film, get the sound mix, color correction. We got interest from Berlin. They wanted to see the film at the festival. Even as a rough cut, they could see the potential. So with all that combination, I managed to premiere it at the Berlin Film Festival. And then from there, it just traveled the world.
Would you say that the film industry has grown now in Uganda?
It has
from 10 years ago?
definitely. It has definitely. In most part, the creativity I see is on the screen, like camera shots, drone shots, the cutting, the editing, the score. All of it is done locally to a very high standard. I saw a trailer for a woman with a yellow jumper, just a trailer, and it looked amazing. So I think on that end we're doing well. Where I think we can probably improve, and this is now, I'm still a rookie, I've just returned, but I could be wrong, but I think the writing still needs to tighten up. And I also think that we need a Ugandan-like aesthetic. And I don't think we have that. You know, you go to different countries, oh, that's Danish cinema, oh, that's British cinema. You know, but there's still not a Ugandan cinema aesthetic. So in that sense, we've still got some way to go. But I'm impressed so far. The acting talent is amazing. I trained all of them with Keith from Kenya, a trainer of actors, and you know, they managed to pull off some really good performances in Imani. And now I see people flying and, you know, doing so well in the industry.
I saw part of the training, the documentary that was put out. Is this what you always wanted to do from when you were a child?
Wow, it's a good question. My father used to make films of us as kids on a Super 8 camera. He's an architect, but he also just filmed us as a hobby. And I think that's where I picked that interest. And at 15, I just borrowed his camera, and I remember filming the holidays and starting. I have the footage, by the way. I digitized it just recently. And I'd interview my brothers and sisters. They were very irritated with me, to be honest, because I'd say, what's your name? It's like, I know your name. So yeah, since I was a teenager, it was a mission of mine, but it took me until university to qualify and make it my career.
But you didn't study this at the beginning?
No, my first degree was architecture, town planning, and urban design. My dad's an architect, and you know, African parents being who they are, they kind of encourage you in certain fields.
Be a doctor, a
Yes.
teacher, a lawyer.
Lawyer, engineer. So I chose that, but I didn't enjoy it, to be frank. And so I spent most of my time at the TV Society at this London University. And so they had a society making programs for the university, and so I became president, and everything kicked off from there.
All right. You mentioned digitizing the footage from how many years ago?
This is the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I'm amazed that you even have the equipment or are able to find the equipment
No, I
to
did this in
digitize
Amsterdam.
that.
There's an
Okay.
old dude with all the gear, and you know, you have to pay quite a bit of money, but you
All
can
right.
get it done.
Speak to me about the work that you're doing here now.
Yes, well, I returned really with a big mission to unleash the talent that's here, the young creative talent. So I have a platform that you can actually go online. It's called IamNative.com. and you can actually put up your portfolio, your information, and we'll be doing interviews for creatives who would like to connect with the global market, so that you can work directly with organizations abroad. If you're really skilled, you're talented, you're eloquent, you're able to hold up yourself, we're able to give you access. So it's a project that's still building, but we've opened up the website already to get buyers and creatives on board. And next year we'll formally do the big launch.
All right. So that's iamnative.com.
Yes, .com.
And does that so you're sort of like the bridge between, you know, African talent
Yes.
and the rest of you know, the world, so Europe and everywhere else.
Absolutely.
When you speak about talent, you are talking about
Documentary filmmakers, writers, sound engineers, voiceover artists. So anything that can be done and uploaded online, it's very easy to work with. As long as we have the broadband speed that we would like, and I know that's still a challenge sometimes, but with that improving every day and everybody going online to stream video, then we should be able to access this information and bridge that gap that exists at the moment.
When we were speaking earlier, you said something, and I think it's what stayed with me the most. You said gigs by locals.
Yeah.
And I know that we are constantly looking for local talent here in Uganda, but also local content. Talk to me about what you're doing in that regard.
Well, you see, with I Am Native, the slogan we have is gigs by locals. My own company, CK Films, you can go online and see that. The whole point of it is that I was working based in Amsterdam. My team were local, be it in East Africa. We'd shoot locally with a local mindset, understanding the territory, understanding the characters. So you're not flying over a whole team. Upload the material, edit in Amsterdam, and deliver to our clients, be they in Uganda or be they in the USA. So it became a very good strategy. First of all, we're reducing on the number of flights, CO emissions, it's inclusive, it's also looks at the environment, but also we use the talent on the ground. And because I lived here for quite a while, I understood the importance of using local talent and not flying in a whole foreign team, because for the most part they don't understand what's happening on the ground. So I was using the best of the worlds that I live in. Yeah.
I think one of the most frustrating things we see is when you're watching a movie and someone is trying to speak, you know, a language, and they're not really getting it the way, you know, they should have, you know, been saying it. It sort of takes away from the community that they're filming. So I think that's very commendable what you're doing. What should we know about local content?
Well, I think when it comes to local content, I see it growing. I see Africa becoming its own market. I think COVID was a wake-up call for a lot of organizations to realize that we should be harnessing our talent here and creating local stories. We have the creativity, we have well-trained professionals, so we should be bridging that gap internally and selling to each other in each market, from Kenya to Uganda and vice versa, for example, within the East African community. So I see it as maybe 10 years from now, we won't need so much foreign content anymore to fill our platforms and to just as an audience to enjoy.
What do you think is holding us back? Because 10 years seems like a long time.
Yeah, well, confidence. I think there's sometimes a lack of confidence. I call it a lack of self-love because I'm very, you know, a little bit of a hippie. But I think it's a lack of self-confidence in what Africans can do. Sometimes people believe in foreigners before they believe in locals. And I would love to change that, you know, because if you look at Singapore or you look at other countries that also kind of emerged in the last 10, 15 years, it's because they love themselves and they love what they do and they promote themselves. So even some government support would be good, because I think that if we showcase ourselves across the globe, it'll only benefit local communities, only benefit local businesses. If you look at Hollywood, they've been marketing themselves for centuries, and that's why it's such a big scene. Look at Nollywood. You know, the Nigerians are very clear. They love themselves. There's nobody better than a Nigerian when you meet them. So I think we also have to harness some of that self-confidence and support each other a bit more.
All right. Let's take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, the NTV Uganda studios. And tonight in the studio, we have Caroline Kamia, who is an entrepreneur, a filmmaker, a producer, and a director. But let's look at another excerpt from one of her films as well. And I guess this is Imani as well.
Rachel. Inti kai for ma be. Akeli bong ma nyen pi wat gang itin. Omira nen malenko. Mire kwane kum lutien ma kum gigum. Ilo nyolo no yo. Lutien ma dong kan dong pian. Ngata gam gipe. Chunyi mi obet yom pinien man. Inti rame adok ga. Nghe an bay war ke tuwe. Tie ki luar. Ai om ye yu pe wa. Wa ya war kai tie mat to nyo. Wi nyo.
Oh, Caroline, when I look at the films that you've done, and I just try to think of a woman in this space. A woman in a lot of spaces is hard enough when you listen to a lot of women's stories. But what is it like being a woman in your field? Being, you know, when you look at even the women that are in front of the camera in the movies that you put out there, but also the women behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I'm sure you've been asked that yourself. And I always think, wow, I don't know how to be a man.
I don't do any of those interviews.
Yeah, but in your field, you know, you're also probably a pioneer, and there are not that many ladies. But I think, yeah, I don't know what to be other than myself. I've always kind of been a go-getter. I've always felt that it's been an asset, not something negative to be a woman. So yeah, I just think I've always been a bit bold and wanted to just reach for what I just see whatever men do, I can do it. Like I've never thought, oh, I'm a woman, therefore I have to take a step back or take it easy. But I think it's how we're brought up. My father never said that the boys can do one thing and the girls can do another. He always said, oh, all of you can do well in your careers. So I think that probably gave me the initial push in my life.
All right. Do you think that there are as many women as men in this field?
No, definitely there are less women. But I think we can do more to mentor each other. That's been a big push in my life. If I think about getting into the BBC, it was a woman who started a scheme to get more ethnic minorities. That's what they call us over in the UK. She noticed, she's a white woman, but she noticed there are very few black people behind the camera. So she started a scheme called Creative Connections, and I got on that program. So, and then also Vancouver, there was a female director who also gave me some support. So in all aspects, I've realized if we don't support each other, it becomes quite difficult to follow your career.
Yeah. What do you think stands in the way of a lot more women getting into this field? I mean, when I think about some of the stories and the films that we see, I think that a lot of voices are lost because you really can't represent people that you are not, you know.
Yeah,
so if
true.
I am directing and I'm a man, I'm the director, the producer, the everything, women's voices will, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, will tend to be lost somewhere, or there'll be misrepresentation.
Well, I see what you're saying, and I see it more in the script writing. If the women don't write women's roles, there's no role for women to perform. And when it comes to directing, I think women directors have a different sensibility than male directors. For example, if you're working a scene with women, as a woman director, there's a sense of familiarity, and maybe the actors can have an ease and a more relaxed vibe, especially if it's an intimate scene. While if it's a man directing, maybe there's a sense of distance and a sense of concern for some women. So we need women to take on those higher roles in terms of production. And also, you can't be what you can't see. If you don't see a woman director as a young girl, you will not think, I could be that.
That's
so it's
true.
definitely very important.
What's been the hardest thing about your job so far?
Oh, I have to
For
think
you.
about that one. The hardest thing. Wow, you've got me now. I was not prepared for that. The hardest thing. Everything is hard, Josephine. Everything is hard.
What's
you
the
know?
hardest? If you had to pick two of the hardest things.
Well, I can talk about a different context. Living abroad, being black and being female, I feel like you have to prove yourself 3-4 times. Well, maybe here you have to prove yourself one more time. You know, it's like one layer. Like, oh, she can do her job. Wow, you know. While over there, yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about. So I think that having to prove yourself a bit more than a man would, I think that's the tough part. But once you're through the gate, it's the same.
And you're also behind the camera. I've seen you also, you're
Yeah.
not just directing, but you
Yeah.
can man the equipment as well.
Yeah, it's actually one film of mine which is in the LA Film Festival right now. I shot quite a bit of it. It's called The Peace Between. And we shot that in France, in Budapest, and in Denmark.
Okay.
And yes, I shot quite a bit of that, but that was a small crew. It was very intimate and was about refugees. And it required that kind of rough and ready, very fast shooting, very different to Imani. And I like that as well. I like to get my hands dirty and get really involved in shooting.
Me too. I had to ask this question. This year and last year was, awash with stories of women coming out and sharing their experiences. And we saw a lot of them from the film industry. And I want to know from you, well, for starters, have you had a Me Too moment?
Yeah, I wonder which woman in the industry hasn't, to be frank. And yeah, it's always a little bit tricky to talk about. But yes, I've had that encounter in Uganda, I would say, and it's quite uncomfortable. And but you kind of have to find a way to navigate the situation without, how could I say, stepping on people's toes, because the industry is also quite political. So you have to manage yourself, but it's not easy. It's not an easy thing when you encounter a Me Too moment.
I think a lot of people struggle with, so you just said without stepping on people's toes, but knowing that a lot of young women are going to come up in the same industry and, they're going to have to make a decision between, do I step on people's toes or do I not? And so do I come out and say, listen, this is wrong and you shouldn't be doing this? And I guess that was the whole point of Me Too.
Yes, absolutely. I think you have to speak up if you encounter abuse and not put yourself, basically, if you encounter it, you have to stand up against it and also support other women so that they don't have to deal with it. And that helps by having more women in the industry. Not to say that a woman can't be abusive, but in general, it's not the case. And yeah, I think speaking up and making sure people know that they're not alone. I think that's very important. If you keep quiet and say, oh, nothing happened to me, then if it happens to a young woman, she might feel that she can't speak to anybody about it. So even you bringing it up, as much as I find it a little bit uncomfortable, I'm all for speaking up against abuse. It's very, very important.
When we look at the film industry now, when you look at films that are just coming out, you'll notice there's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of effort being made to ensure that there's representation. What does representation and diversity look like for you in the films that you put out?
Well, it's interesting you ask me that. I'd say when I'm in Europe, people ask me, why do you always make black films? But nobody would ask me that here, right? So
we'd ask you, why do you always make white films if you were
yeah, exactly.
if you were doing the opposite?
Yeah. So I mean, I work on things that in my independent work that interest me, and that means that it's mainly focused on Africa or African themed projects. Commercially, I will work on anything. I've worked on Chinese projects. You'll see from my content reel, traveled all over the place, Germany, Russia. So I love working on diverse content, but it depends on which point of view we're coming from. So diversity from a European standpoint is inclusive of black people. Diversity over here is inclusive of international content. So on both ends, that's what I do.
All right, and I mean, when you think about if you were doing Ugandan films, there'd be the aspect of ensuring you bring in as many of the different cultures, you know, and tribes that we have, and minority groups as well. So, okay.
Yeah, I think I can speak on that when it comes to Imani. When we had the National Theatre open auditions, I didn't know who was who. I mean, I'm not even looking at the surname. To be honest, sometimes I don't even think about all that, but we had all the different cultures and all the different ethnic groups within the film, coincidentally. And then, of course, I did have a part of the film set in the north, and I really wanted intentionally to do that because at the time the northern situation had died down, the children were coming out of the rehab camps, and I wanted to put a stamp on that and say we're not at war anymore. You know, Uganda is really now on the quiet and we're getting on with life. Because I think abroad they still thought of Idi Amin or the Lord's Resistance Army, and I felt
as the definition of Uganda.
Absolutely.
All right, Carolyn, why did you decide to come back and set up shop in Uganda? A lot of people want to leave because the grass is greener on the other side, and they think there are a lot of opportunities out there. You're coming back home. What are you telling us?
Well, you know, COVID is also a good way to start rethinking your life journey. But even before that, I knew that I could get the best of both worlds. And once again, I was brought up like that. They sent us abroad to study, and the main mission was to come back and set up shop at home. So having my business in Amsterdam and extending it now in Uganda seems to fulfill two of my dreams, which was not to give up on the West, but really to come back home, because I just love Uganda. I think the best talent is here. I don't care what anybody else says. We're really some of the most creative people, we're most beautiful people, very hardworking, very entrepreneurial, very go-get spirit, and I always get the best out of myself being here. So I thought, why don't we actually make our base again in Uganda and continue working with our clients and building up the industry. And also the school that I have, Uganda Arts and Media Academy. I've been asked a lot about it since I came, and I decided, I talked to my cousin today, I said I'm building it back up. That's a big mission of mine. So we have a training institute as well.
Tell me a bit more about that.
Well, what I did when I was based in Uganda before I shifted to Amsterdam was I had Uganda Arts and Media Academy, which was like a summer school. So I would basically fly over my friends from the UK or the States or Norway at the time, and we would have workshops with young people who had never done any filmmaking before, never held a camera, sound, nothing. Put them up in a residency and have these workshops. And I mean, my friends, it was the highlight of their year as well, because they'd do this with young people, then we'd go on a safari afterwards. So we'd have even a festival at the end, and you've got young people now who are running their own production companies who started at Uganda Arts and Media Academy. So I'm proud of that already. So I only know that's the tip of what we can do and what impact we can have on young people's lives. So it's one of my missions now to bring it back.
Have you watched any of the movies from Wakaliwood?
Yes, I can say I have, definitely. Why did you laugh? Does it bring back some memories for you as well?
They make me very happy when I watch them.
Really?
Who Killed Captain Alex?
Yeah, that's a famous
all
film.
Of them.
That is I think a lot of Americans, that's the only film they know made in Uganda. It's amazing. Oh, put it this way, there's space for every kind of film, you know? And I think that initially maybe some people felt like, oh, that doesn't represent Uganda, it's a bit rough around the edges, but it's so creative, you know? And we really have to embrace that kind of creativity as much as those who want to make the more commercial content, which is so perfectly put together with higher budgets.
No! Jump! Like Rambo! No way, you jump! He's just a mere boy for the super transmission.
So I give them a lot of credibility, especially when I've been living abroad. I do smile as well, like the explosions and the effects. And, you know, I remember watching was using real blood at some point, then they went to fake blood, you know, and yeah, that's the magic. Maybe it's the most naive filmmaking, but it's also something very beautiful about it.
It's very entertaining, if we're
It's
honest
very
about it.
entertaining.
It
It's very entertaining, but, you know, not to detract from the hard work.
Yeah. A lot goes into it. You're not going to put something like that together without thinking,
Exactly.
you know, you have to be very creative.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of
and they have
creativity there.
such a limited budget. Well, at least at the time I saw the work, they had limited budget. Maybe now they've got more support from abroad because they're into that kind of thing.
All right. All right, Caroline, let's take another short break and we'll be right back.
Right.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Tonight we're talking about the film industry and Caroline Kamia is my guest. Caroline, one of the issues that I wanted us to talk about is mental health. And I say this because actors and actresses, well, people in that industry, you show up. And when you show up, you're not even showing up to be yourself. You're showing up to play a part. So whether you're having a bad day, whether you have, whatever it is, you have to play the part. Is there any support in terms of mental health that we're looking at for that industry?
Well, I think it's something that's needed, to be honest. In terms of actors abroad, usually there's somebody available on set if there's a particularly difficult scene, like a rape scene or something very hard to go through, because the actor has to really get into the part. So in order for a director to get them motivated, they have to make them reach to certain situations of their own to make it come alive. So usually have support. But in Uganda, you'd have to tell me, really, if that's the case, because things are moving on, but I'm not sure that it's available for people on set right here in Uganda. But it's even outside of the actors. As a director, I felt burnout after making Imani. It was very, very emotionally draining to direct it, to produce it. I was handing out money on set for things while directing, and I would never do that today. I would really make sure that I had a good, strong team in certain areas where I felt that I could manage by myself. So it's very important to get the balance right, and also to take the time out, not constantly go from one job to the other, because we always get worried, especially if you're a freelancer. Oh, I'm only as good as my next gig, and if I don't take that job, I won't get any more. But to be frank, if you have to think about your well-being and have a rest.
I think for a lot of people, it's not so much their well-being, it's that the money. You know, the money, you know, they get per gig is very little. It's not going to tide them over to the next gig, so they need to do as much as they can. So you find people are doing so many things at the same time. And I guess the pay in the industry is not as good as, you know, I don't guess, I'm sure it's not as good as it is abroad. So that's another factor.
Yeah, I can imagine the pressure is there, but the irony is, however much somebody's making, they always want to make more. So although somebody might get paid more, relatively speaking, in the West, their commitments are also bigger. Their rent costs, their living costs are also quite huge. So it ends up that they feel the same desperate need to go from job to job in order to survive. And then you have burnout, and in the end, you're not able to work anyway. So in a sense, having a break and saying no might actually be beneficial, because somebody might go, wow, they've said no. Oh, maybe they really are very important. Maybe I need to bring up my budget. So it can work out actually of benefit to be able to take a pause for a moment in your career and come back refreshed.
Yeah. Well, Caroline, before I leave that issue of mental health, I just want you to reiterate and just really emphasize it. The best way that you can for, you know, you've lived in different worlds, so you're able to speak a bit more about it than I can articulate it. Just speak to us about mental health and why it is important that we factor that in and you know, keep it in check.
Yeah, I think, you see, when you're stressed or depressed, somebody may not know it. It's not like somebody's had a car accident. You see them on a wheelchair, you feel empathy for them, you see them on crutches. When somebody has a mental health issue, first of all, when you say mental health, a lot of people start thinking negatively about it. Think, oh, put them in a mental asylum. No, that's not the case. Actually, you can have small issues that get exacerbated if they're not looked into. So the human being, this is how I see it, it starts in the mind. If the mind is not settled, the body cannot be settled. A lot of the issues we have around cancer, a lot of issues we have around diabetes, yes, they're physical conditions, but if the mental is not sorted, it manifests in physical illness. So I'd say the first is to sort out your mental health. The physical will be in balance. That's how I see it.
And you know, for a lot of people, it is, you know, mental health is looked at as a sign of weakness.
Yes.
How are you not able
to cope with
cope
it? Yeah,
with this situation?
Right. Especially as Africans,
Our
you know.
ancestors have gone
That's
through
right.
worse than you have.
That's right. But you know, we live in such a different world. I mean,
Yeah.
think about social media. I would not like to be a teenager right now. Because when I was a teenager, you had one phone in the house and everybody knew who was calling you. But now you've got your iPad, you've got your phone, you've got random strangers calling teenagers. And I think it's even more important for young people to get support and to be able to talk about their stresses and strains.
All right. Thank you for that, Carolyn. You've done some work with HBO, and I think and a lot of other, you've had a lot of other opportunities. I think for young people who are watching and are interested in the film industry, the question is, where are the opportunities? Where do I start out? How do I start out?
Yeah.
You know, it looks very daunting. So what do you say to them about the opportunities that are out there?
Okay, that's a very good question, Josephine. I think it's two ways. If you're in a household where you have access to a video camera, or you have an iPad, or you have a smartphone. Some people don't have access to that, but let's say you do. Start making films right now of your family, of your friends. Start cutting them. You know, there's cheap software, even free software online. So for me now, there's no excuse why you can't start making films from now in your bedroom. If you don't have access to that, go to the studios, ask to volunteer. Say, can I come make tea and coffee at your studio? That's what I did when I was in the UK. Although I was at university, I went to the film school and I was buying cigarettes for the director, photocopies. I had 2 degrees at that point, but I still did that job because it gave me an entry point. And then they go, wow, this kid, she's always on set, she's always available. Whenever I need anything, she gets it done. Next thing, okay, we'll hire her. You know, make it more official. So take the opportunities where they are. If you're passionate about it, be willing to do it for free. I always think those are the best creatives because they love it so much. I loved it so much, I would have paid to do it. You know, it was like, I was so passionate. So just keep the enthusiasm, start making some films from where you are with whatever gear you have. Send them out to little film festivals. You never know, you can win a little award and already you're on the move. And for practically speaking, if you can get training, please get training.
And we have film school here, so
exactly.
All right. When you speak about the smartphones, and you're telling people, you know, record your family, you know, make the little films, and I'm thinking about the opportunity that there is with social media now, that you can just brand yourself, put yourself out there. You can just start out on your own until somebody picks you up, and you know, as you pick up the skill. But you speak about smartphones, and I know that for big films you use these huge cameras, this heavy equipment. What can I do with the technology that I have now?
Now, well, if we're talking about smartphones, you can make a 3-minute movie, a 2-minute movie. You can set a movie in a lift and have dialogue and only one character. There's a film actually you can see online. It's made by an Iranian director whose name evades me, but he's only 20-something years old. It got over 7 million hits on social media. It's an award-winning film, and it's just 4 characters, 2 cars, and a conversation in both cars. That's it. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be full of explosions and special effects. You don't actually need big gear. You just have to have a good idea, a good, strong idea, and one location and a couple of characters, and you've got a film.
All right. My final question to you, Carolyn, just to put some things into context, what has been maybe oversimplified or exaggerated about your industry that you'd like to clarify as we close this interview?
Yeah, I think the film industry, a lot of people think it's glitz and glamour. They see the awards parties, they see the stars and, you know, the high life, but it's a difficult industry for those who really want to do good work. There are a lot of struggles, a lot of late nights, a lot of coffee drinking. You know, it's not glamorous. I remember when I made some of my first short films here in Uganda, one called the African series. I remember editing late in the office, sleeping on the desk because we had to wait for something to upload. It was a nightmare, but we're just passionate. We wanted it to happen, and you know, then when the awards come, it's a beautiful thing, but it's not easy to get there. And you have to persist. You have to have a lot of persistence and self-confidence, not in an arrogant way, not in I am the best. No, I can do it kind of confidence. Yeah.
And I want to do it.
And I want to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
What should we take home from this conversation, Carolyn, for the young people that are out there watching and perhaps this is their dream, or people who have never really thought about the film industry at all and now they're watching you and thinking, oh, what are these people talking about? What should they take home from this conversation?
Wow. It's like a piece of art. I guess they take from it what they will. But I would say my message is that if you love filmmaking, if you're passionate about it, go for it. This is the right time. Definitely even 20 years ago, parents would put you off. But I think now the generation are encouraging the children to do more art. So go for it and start where you are. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Carolyn Kamia has been speaking to us about her journey, but also what it's like in the film industry and the opportunities that are out there. Thank you for watching the show. Coming up is NTV Weekend Edition.